Welcome to the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses all the things that schools may have missed, with your hosts AJ Kuti and Jason Gordon. Hey everyone, we're back. We are the Reschool'd podcast, the show that discusses the things that schools may not have prepared you for. As always, I'm AJ. Across from me, Jason. Jason, how you doing today?
Doing great, AJ.
Man, it is coming down to that time. I'm excited for the end of the semester, beginning of the next one. But what about you?
Yep, I've already, I'm being proactive this time. I'm already arranging my next semester syllabi. So yeah, I'm getting in that zone.
Yeah, well, that would make sense because I'm definitely not. I am waiting. I usually wait until probably the few days before class starts to get all that stuff together.
Well, I've learned some things since COVID, and since we're going back into the normal semester, the normal face-to-face classes, I've made some corrections to my syllabus, implemented some of these techniques I've used during COVID, and certainly gotten rid of a lot of them to try to make it a little better. We'll see how it works out this semester.
Well, we are on episode, 23, 22, somewhere around there. I can't remember what it is, but I think it's 22. We are on that, and we've done 21 previous to this, and we've listened to most of them. Is there something that you've learned about yourself during this process?
Absolutely. I talk slower than I thought I did, which I already knew I talk slowly, right? I mean, by virtue of where I grew up, but I talk slower than I thought I did. So I've tried to pick that pace up just a little bit. I say too much, like I just did, getting a little better at that, but that, and I've realized I really enjoy this. This is so much fun.
I'm astonished at how many times we say absolutely in a podcast. I mean, and the listeners don't get to see much of it because I typically cut some of them out too, but we say that a lot.
Yeah, and I constantly think, do I say it that much in real life?
That's what I'm afraid of, is like in class, do I actually say it that much?
Well, I warn my students always, because I do follow that model that I mentioned about. I always tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then tell you what I told you. And I warn students, I repeat myself a lot because this is my way of delivering information. And I find myself doing it here a little bit too much.
No, it's good for the listeners, though. I mean, I love that. I told my wife about that the other day in the car. We were talking about, I said, yeah, he said this thing about you tell him what you want, going to tell him, you tell him, and then you tell him what you said. I was like, that's a really interesting kind of concept because you don't think of it in that way. Well,
before we jump in, I do want to remind everybody, please, we want to hear from you guys. Visit our website, reschool'd.com. That's Reschool with a D, not an ED. Check out our social media handles, Reschool'd Pod on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and also on YouTube, right? We've dropped our YouTube videos on there to help you out on specific topics that are shorter, more succinct, and direct. And also make certain to like us on your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Google, Apple, right? Get notifications when we drop new episodes. But as much as anything, reach out to us. Use that contact button on the website and tell us the things you want us to talk about, the things that are of interest to you, that matter to you, because that's why we're here. We're here for you guys.
Yeah, man, that's what we want to hear. We want to hear from you. That's the whole purpose of doing this. Remember, we said that from the very beginning, like our goal is to just minimum help one person. And the more we can hear back from you all saying that we did some kind of help, that's all we ever need. And that's all we ever want. Because like Jason said, we're having fun with this. We're loving this. This is so much fun to us. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about something that may be on the mind of a lot of college students, may not be on the mind of some of them. We're going to be talking about graduate school. You know, what comes after finishing up undergrad? What comes after getting your bachelor's? Does that sound good to you, Jason?
Sure. I'm excited about that one.
Well, let's jump into our quick question real quick. And this one, I want you to think back. I want you to think back to when you were in graduate school. How was life different in graduate school than it was in undergrad?
Oh, wow. It was way different, I would say. See, I've been to 3 different graduate schools. So
you have a lot to choose from.
Right. And it's been at different points and times in life. You know, during one of them, I was married with children. One of them, I was married without children. And one of them, I was single. I met my wife at the end. Right. And they were varying lengths. One was 3 years, one was 2 years, one was 1 year. So that being said, in a pear tree. They were quite different. Initially when I was single, it was more professional in nature than undergraduate. It required a lot more time. a lot more dedication to, what you're doing. Later on, I would say business school was way more involved. The work was nowhere near as difficult, or as demanding as far as like just level of comprehension, but it required so much time. There were a lot of diverse subjects, that type of thing, and a lot of teamwork and stuff like that you didn't have during undergraduate. And then later on, my transactional degree was more, it was more independent. It was more, I don't know, just a very specific topic based. So it was just, all of them were very different, but very different indeed from undergraduate, which was more, I don't know, there was less structure to it. You had more ability to craft your classes and your degree path and things like that. In graduate school, that just goes down, right? I mean, in graduate school, you picked a program, so it's like you're all in the same major. You all have very similar classes to take. You all know the same professors. It's more of a tight-knit group. So, I mean, that's my perception of how it was different. I think that would be different for everybody. What about you?
Yeah, mine was different, definitely different from undergrad, because undergrad I wasn't married, grad school I was married. I mean, we got married in the summer of me going to grad school. So, and then it was also in a different town. So I moved with my wife, and I also had a stepson. So that was, not only was I learning how to be a husband, I was learning how to be a father, and I was learning how to go to grad school and actually have to take this stuff even more seriously than I was doing in undergrad, provide for everyone. And it was rough. It was definitely rough for me just because of all those learning things. I wouldn't change it. I learned a lot from it, but it was tougher because you're at a different level. And it was different. It was a struggle.
Yeah. And I mean, honestly, just to echo that, that's the way you should go into it, looking at it like it's going to be something different. It's going to be more challenging. It's going to add things to your plate because, as we talked about in prior episodes, like that last year of college, things become more real. Life, moves on. You have relationships, you move to a new city, things like that. Things pile on. So graduate school can be extremely stressful just because all of those factors come together, where oftentimes earlier on, you're 18, 19, 20 years old. You may not have had all those responsibilities come together at the same time. So how do you manage life, work, family, social activities along with the school and work required there?
Yeah, I will say I did feel like it was more stressful to me because I took it more seriously than I did in undergrad. Like I cared so much more about my grades in grad school because I knew what they had to be, that I got that anxiety, that stress over, oh, am I going to do this? I pulled more all-nighters. Still didn't learn when I was in undergrad to do it early, but I pulled more of them trying to get, still didn't learn not to do that.
That's one of those factors we talk about throughout each episode, that level of engagement that helps you get more out of the learning experience. You were in graduate school, that you knew what career path you were taking. The classes meant more. You were more engaged in it. You put more effort into it. You cared more just because of that. And it was, you cared about grades, but you also cared about learning.
Yeah, I will say one big difference is that I noticed when I was in grad school is the people around you in grad school were just as serious as you were in grad school. Like it wasn't like you had this, some people didn't care, some people cared a lot. Like they were all there to study hard and get it. So you can actually get a lot from them because they were all in that kind of same boat as you were.
Yeah, and we talk about that in a different episode when we talk about the benefits of graduate school, and we talk about the students sitting beside you and how you can learn from the students beside you. In another episode, and I want to bring this up too, we talk about, does colleges matter, right? Does the name of the college and things like that, what do you study? Well, lots of times when you go to one college versus another, the demographic of the student is going to change in terms of how much they care about school, right? Their performance before coming to college, how much drive and motivation, how much influence outside they have to do well in classes and things like that. So who you're sitting beside in class makes a huge difference as to how much you care about the material, how fast you go, what you want to learn, the output you have in your group projects and things like that. So, and you see a lot more of that in graduate school than you do undergraduate.
You have to be careful with that too.
Oh, yes.
I will say this, and again, this is one of those stories I can't believe I'm saying. I feel like I'm the screw up on the show. Like you're the one that's like the good one. Like you're the good brother and I'm the screw up brother that, But I remember when I was in grad school, I was taking one class and the teacher you all have your student ID numbers. And so they would put the grades up on the projector that says, okay, this is what the class grades were. Here's all the A's, here are all the B's, C's, D's, and F's. And they would put them in columns. And so I would look at the F's. I remember one test, I would look at the F's. I'm thinking, there are 5 grades in the F's. And then I saw my student ID number there. I'm like, oh, crap, I'm one of them. And I looked to my buddy who was sitting next to me. I was like, dude, where are you at? He said, I'm on the F column. I said, me too. And I looked to my right and another guy. I said, where are you at? He said, F. And then the 2 guys behind us were the F. We were the 5 that sit in a cluster in the class that we were the Fs. Everybody else and everywhere else got an A through D or whatever. Us 5. And I know the teacher was like, uh-huh. They either studied together or cheated together. And if they cheated, they just did a lousy job at it.
See, I would have made up an excuse for myself. I would have said, the professor just threw them down the stairs and the papers that landed on this step got an A, a B, a C, a D, a D, an F, and I just happened to land at the bottom, right?
I did actually have a professor tell me that when they graded tests, like when they graded research papers, when they had papers due, that whoever the first one on the stack was just got an 80. Like that was the median grade, and so they just gave it an 80. I was like, you don't even read them? He's like, no, that's the median grade. I was like, that's lousy because, well, granted, if I was the one on the top, I was like, yes, I got an 80. But if you're somebody that put a lot of effort into it, I'm like, that's crappy.
Oh, see, I would have called him out on that because if I would have gotten that 80, I went to other people and I wanted to read their paper to see what they got. And I would have taken it to the professor and be like, what in the world? How did I get an 80 and this guy got a 90? Look at the difference in our papers.
Yeah. I'd have had 2 lines on it and I got an 80. You'd have 14 pages. Well, let's get into the main topic. Let's get into grad school. Let's talk about grad school from the listener's perspective and some of the questions that they may be having. The first one, I think, is probably the most common one, maybe, and that is it a must to go to grad school directly after graduating undergrad? And is there more benefit to do that or waiting?
Well, I have pretty strong opinions on this one, and I'm a little bit slanted in that opinion because I come from a business school background, but I also have a law degree, so I see both sides of the coin. In many scenarios, it is beneficial to go immediately to grad school. When is it beneficial for that? When graduate school is integral to getting the certification or the credit or the credentials necessary to follow whatever career path you're looking for. Like for you as an accountant, right?
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. If you go on
to get a master's of accounting immediately after undergraduate, that's a natural follow-on, right? You need those additional credit hours to take the CPA exam. Also, it qualifies you for more jobs, particularly like your big firm accounting jobs, your big 4, all right, type jobs. If you want to do that type of thing, the MAC, Masters of Accounting, is going to help you a ton. So it is a natural follow-on to your undergraduate degree. Law school, the same way. Right? If you want to practice law, there's no prior knowledge you need coming into law school. It's just you have a degree, you take the entrance exam, you do all that, and they teach you everything you need to know in school, right? So in law school. So that being said, right, it's a natural follow-on to say, I want to practice law, I need to go on and do this. I think the same way with medical school. Now, can you take time in between? Of course you can. And it's not going to hurt you to do that, right? It might actually help you rejuvenate, that type of thing, get ready to study, get your life in order, build up some finances, things like that. So there are life reasons that you would wait, but there's no negative aspect to going on as long as you're ready, as long as you're not burnt out, and we can talk more about that later. But there are certain programs where you definitely should not go on. I would say number 1 would be the MBA program. And it shocks students when I say this, that getting an MBA right after undergraduate can hurt you more than it helps you. Have you ever heard that?
I've never heard that, no. That's a really interesting take on it. I'm interested to hear.
Well, the reason behind it is this. So an MBA program, the courses you take are very similar to the courses you take in undergraduate as a business major, right? The MBA is designed to be a finishing degree, meaning that you've got some level of professional experience in a given business field. You go back to the business school for an MBA, you get a well-rounded education that's primarily focused in teamwork, leadership, and communications. Now, you'll have a concentration and you'll take skill-based classes, but many of those skill-based classes are very similar to what you would have taken in undergraduate, right? An MBA is also great for people who didn't major in business in undergraduate. They go out and they join the business world and they find themselves doing business activities, so they need that knowledge. And that's why they repeat a lot of those classes, the accounting, the economics, the finance, the marketing, those general education classes that you take other than your concentration. But if you go straight to an MBA program out of undergraduate, you don't have the years of experience, one, that they're looking for to let you in. So a really good MBA program, a top 25 MBA program, is not going to let you in unless you have several years of experience, because their business model was focused on placement, their ability to place you with firms at a $100,000 salary with a 20 to 40 bonus, right, in the top companies. That is their objectives. That is how they rank. If you look them up in the, top ranking U.S. News and World Report, Princeton Review, things like that, that rank these schools, those are the two primary factors that they look at, right? Employment within 3 months and those salary and bonus factors, and then where you're being placed with firms, right? That type of thing. If you go straight out of undergraduate to a business school, they're not going to be able to place you with these firms. You don't have the requisite credentials for these firms to hire you into those positions, right? You're still going to be competing for entry-level positions. So to think that you're going to go to an MBA program and step into a higher-level role like that, you won't, right? So you go to an MBA program, you're going to be competing again for those entry-level positions, ones where the MBA did not help you earn more money, right? You've paid all this money. You're not earning any more money. You're competing for undergraduates for the same position. But the thing is, as part of the natural growth in an organization, the evolution is that eventually, once you've been a professional service provider, in whatever field, accounting, operations, finance, marketing, for a certain number of years, you're going to then go to an MBA program or something like that as a finishing degree that will help you then move to be a manager of sorts of professional service providers, right? You'll be the manager of the accounting floor. You'll be the manager of a group of marketers, that type of thing. If you've already got an MBA, right, and that helped you or was your stepping stone to even get into the organization, you can't go back again. No school's going to allow you to come get a second MBA. It's just they won't, right? I've talked to career services about this. So you have effectively paid for a school that didn't necessarily help you, and you have blocked yourself off from the ability to go back in the future when it can really help you. All that taken together, you have actually hurt your career potential by going to an MBA program directly out of undergraduate.
That's really
anyway,
take.
It's a very interesting scenario, but that's just one example that I can illustrate that says, in some scenarios, particularly where professional experience is required, you can harm your career chances or potential by going directly to a graduate school program.
I've never thought of it that way. Again, my take from my situation was I was going to go directly into grad school, not thinking about it the way you talked about it, but thinking about it from my perspective that we talked about in a previous episode, where I felt like I needed to do that continuous go from one school to the next, because if I had that gap year, if I had that years of experience, I would get out of this mindset of studying or get out of the student mindset. And I know myself, I could get out of that pretty quickly, and it would severely affect my grades going back to school. And so that was mine, but I never thought of it that way. And I think that's a great, it's really important for the listeners to understand this is something I need to take into consideration. This is not how it's always going to be. It's not going to be for my situation, but I need to take that into consideration.
And you're really smart for thinking of it that way. So if you've eliminated that hurdle of saying, you need that professional experience, that going right on is not going to hurt you, then all of a sudden you do the calculus that you're doing, right? Yeah. Personally, is this right for me? Do I need some time to build up financial resources to get myself ready for school, that type of thing? Or would doing that in some way cause me to lose motivation, to lose steam, to, put it off further and risk not going back? So in your scenario, you were worried it would interrupt your flow of, you needed to just go directly on to graduate school and make that happen. Other people need to take that gap year. In many ways, I wish I had taken a gap year, because when I got to law school, because of my very tedious schedule in undergraduate, I was very burnt out. I'm not going to lie, my first year of law school, if there was a year in my life in school that I kind of phoned it in, that was the year.
Well, that leads us to the next question, too. That's a great segue, because the next question is burnout in grad school a bigger issue?
it's a huge issue for many people, right? If you go to a program immediately after undergraduate, you have no break, right? So you hopefully you have a head of steam built up and you're ready to go into graduate school and study. I didn't. I went to graduate school and I was burnt out. I was ready to stop. In which, I mean, I caught my second wind a little bit after that first year, and I was ready to study again. But again, I was thinking of doing a JD MBA program, and I just dropped the idea of doing the MBA program and adding a year to law school simply because I'd run out of energy. There was burnout, right? So it's real. It happens, right? And law school was a 3-year program, right? Some other graduate school programs are a 1 or 2 or some
Yeah, my
mix
Mac
in
program
between.
was 1.
Okay, yeah. So sometimes you don't have to have as much steam built up to get through the full program, right? So I think it's about measuring where you are, right? I mean, that calculus that you were talking about of, am I ready financially in my life and things like that, but also do I have the motivation and willpower to get in there and do the work necessary? Because, particularly your shorter programs like your 1-year programs are very intensive from the very moment you step out of the gate, right? So you really have to be ready.
Yeah, it is a big difference from undergrad to grad. Is there a different way to think when it comes to which graduate program to apply for and ultimately go to? Like different in the ways that we would for undergrad? So like, is there a checklist for grad school that's going to be different than undergrad?
Well, I would say so. Procedurally, yes, and generally thought process, I would say yes as well. Picking a graduate school is very similar to picking a major in college, but it's even a little more serious than that, right? Oftentimes people choose a major that, well, they may not continue on in a career path with that major, right? You might study accounting, but you go into business management, right? Or you might go into a completely different field. You study psychology, but you go into business. That type of thing happens all the time. If you are going to spend the money to go to a graduate school program, 9 times out of 10, that's going to be the career path that you follow. So you need to really do some soul searching up front and understand what a career looks like in that field. I meet people all the time who go to a particular graduate school program and then don't continue on in that career. And honestly, they incurred a lot of debt or at least paid a lot of money for education and training in a given field that they don't use professionally. And more often than not, the graduate school program is structured in a way that you are going to use it. It is made to help you professionally, not just in personal development, right? It's made to take you down a career path. So you have to do that analysis first. Do I want to go down this career path? Do I fully understand it? How would this graduate degree help me? What will that mean? What will be my next steps after that? If you understand all those things fully, then you can make the decision.
I do think that, because we mentioned this in a previous one before, but I do think name recognition of the grad school is a bit more important than what it is in undergrad. Because again, if you're going to put this on your resume or they're going to look at the last place that you studied from. So if you went to, a very small college, not a whole lot of name recognition, but in a graduate program, you went to an Ivy League school, then it's going to show that you had enough to get into the Ivy League school as your last college, and it's going to hold a little bit more weight than it would if it was just your undergrad. Would you agree with that?
That's absolutely true. I will say this: there are Ivy League programs even that are not difficult to get into. They're expensive, right? They're extremely expensive, and that's the hurdle. And oftentimes they do want some background or some demonstration that you're going to be a good fit for the program. But by and large, graduate school in particular, if you're willing to pay the money, there are some really prestigious schools out there that will allow you in. Now, does that name recognition help you in job opportunities? Most certainly. They aren't all created equal, right? Harvard Business School is going to give you a lot more opportunities than Harvard School of Underwater Basket Weaving. I don't know.
Hey, I like that. I like that degree. I use that a lot.
Right? I don't know but there are. I was looking at some research the other day that showed the cost to income ratio right? The cost of a school to the beginning salary or income level of graduates. And Columbia University scored extremely poorly because it offered several graduate programs where, the debt that students incur is $200,000, $300,000 sometimes for the master's program, and their starting salaries are abysmal, right? $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 after incurring that much debt. They can't even pay their debt, their graduate school debt, based upon the salaries they start. It was shocking to see this, and you can Google this. There are a lot of Department of Education information pamphlets out there that show you the cost return on education and things. That's particularly an issue now with student debt rising so quickly in the U.S. But that being said, right, you've got a prestigious name, but it doesn't necessarily help you get a job in a field that will compensate you the way you want to. Now, but back to your original point, does going to a graduate school allow you to acquire some credentials and a name brand that would otherwise not allow you to, if you went to a smaller, lesser known school undergraduate, that you wouldn't otherwise have those credentials or that name recognition to get a job? Yes, absolutely. I've seen it with people that I'm very close to or know very well, where they went to a much lesser known undergraduate institution. Then they went to an Ivy League graduate school, ones that weren't necessarily difficult to get into. They were very expensive, but luckily these people had the money to go to those schools. And then afterwards, they did have the opportunity or job opportunities that they otherwise would not have had. Now, they may not have made a ton of money in those job opportunities, right? But at least they had the opportunity to start down that career path, right? It gave them the name recognition because they had a prestigious institution listed on their credentials. And then, there is an alumni base that helps you. There's the third-party perception about them. So all of that taken together, it can be a huge benefit. But you still do need to do the cost-benefit analysis. It costs a lot of money, right? And if you're paying for it yourself, that's a big deal. Most of the people I knew, they had a lot of help, right? They either came from families with money, they inherited money, partial scholarships, that type of thing.
Fun fact, there are colleges that offer underwater basket weaving courses.
Really?
Yes. Since 1980, Reed College in Portland, Oregon has offered underwater basket weaving classes. And there's some other ones. University of Arizona was another one.
So I definitely wouldn't want to get a master's degree in that topic.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't get a lot of return on that one.
No.
Well, what advice do you have for students thinking about applying to grad school or wondering even if grad school is right for them?
Well, I would say first, figure out what you really want career-wise. We've talked about the life plan in other episodes. And if you don't know what we're talking about, please go back and listen to that episode. I think it's a decent one. But
one of our better ones.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to understand what it takes to get where you want to go in life in all of these different areas, not just career-wise, professionally, personally, socially, anything, all the places, all the things on the outside of that circle that you want to achieve. A step in one direction can move you forward towards any of those end goals, right? So you have to understand, when is graduate school right for you? When will it fit in your life, given everything that's going on, but in a way that will move you towards more than one of those goals, right? Where it will move your life forward in the direction you care about. And it's not always the case that will happen, right? So figure out first what you want and what will move you forward. And if you do that, then you are in the position to make the decision on, is graduate school right for me? What graduate school is right for me? When is going to graduate school right for me? Those types of things.
I would say my advice is from the strategy side, because that's more on brand with me. But I've had a lot of students, and this is the examples I'm going to be using is very specific to my situation. Again, I teach accounting, so it's more specific to my students who are in my accounting class, or some of them, but it can be used for other things as well. But it's looking into possibly getting a master's in something or going to grad school for something that is different but similar to your undergrad degree. And so, for example, what I'm talking about is I've had students say, I'm not sure if I want to do finance or accounting. Now, for those who don't know, finance and accounting are very similar. I mean, they have a lot of overlap. A lot of times we just call things different terminologies. But there's a lot of overlap. And a lot of times if you're looking at jobs, they typically lump finance and accounting together. And so for those students, I always typically ask them, because they say, well, should I get a bachelor's in finance or should I get a bachelor's in accounting? And then my next question usually is, are you planning on going to grad school? If you are, then why not get both? Why not get a bachelor's in one and a master's in the other? That way you have a foundation of one and a specialization in another. If you go finance and finance, a bachelor's in finance and master's in finance, then you know finance, but you don't know necessarily all the accounting side of it. If you do accounting and accounting, you know all the accounting, but you don't know the finance side. But if you do bachelor's in finance and master's in accounting, or vice versa, now you have the ability to really use those to your advantage when you're looking for jobs to say, look, this is a financial position, this is a finance position. I have the finance background, or I have the specialization in finance, but I also have the accounting background. And like I said, you can use this for multiple areas or majors that kind of have that overlap.
That's a great point, AJ. I tell people when I'm advising them on startups and building their business all the time, when you're hiring, you don't hire duplicative skills, you hire complementary skills. And so in your scenario, finance, accounting degree, highly related, you do the math and say, what do I want to do career-wise, and which one should I do undergraduate, and that type of thing. And, you might not be able to get into an accounting program if you didn't study accounting type scenario. So it might need to be that accounting is the undergraduate and finance. So once you figure out that scenario, right, which one's appropriate, acquiring complementary skills, something that expands yourself rather than just doubles down on what the skills that you already have, may be advantageous, right? So that's really good advice.
And you brought up a good point, because I do want to preface that, because I don't want people to think, well, I can just go right into one. You do have to have certain prereqs to get into accounting master's program. Same thing with finance. And typically I tell these students early enough in their undergrad career that they can use their electives as some of those prereqs to get into the master's programs that they want to. So they're not spinning the wheels or having to pay extra money or a ton of extra money for that. One last question. What are some things that you think the listeners should know about graduate school application process? Because that's a big one. The application process is an animal of itself.
Well, to start with, you have to figure out for your program what they care about.
Yeah, because each of them is different, right?
Everyone's different. I mean, medical school, for example, it's all about that MCAT score. Law school, it's all about that LSAT score, which are the entrance exams, right? Second to those are GPA and, and then far behind that, extracurriculars, right? Your involvement in things like that, prior experience. Medical school requires that you have taken certain prerequisite courses, right? Your organic chemistries, your biologies, your anatomies, physiologies, things like that. Law school requires none of that. So that's not a consideration there. Teaching programs might require that you have an undergraduate in education, for example. So make certain you understand your program and what they care about. And then once you've done that, you can say, okay, how do I put my best foot forward? Okay, do I need to, if the mix of determining whether I get in, whether I get scholarships, that type of thing in this given school that I've chosen as being my number one choice versus other schools or other programs, how do I prepare for that? Do I need to study harder? Do I need to take a practice course for whatever entrance exam I'm taking? Do I need to get some kind of extracurricular activities or experience in a given area to get in? I talked about the MBA program, and if you don't have a substantial amount of professional experience in a given area, right, you're not going to get into your program of choices. I don't care if you have a perfect score and a perfect GPA. You're still not going to be placeable at a certain level in organizations, so it's less likely that they're going to let you into the program, right? So again, you've got to do that math and understand what the program wants. Then you can prepare for it appropriately.
Yeah, so grad schools have a myriad of different things that they're going to require. Some of them most of them are going to require applications. They're going to have fees. They're going to require your transcripts, but they may have, most of them are probably going to have your tests, like Jason said. They may require letters of recommendation. They may require essays, like a personal statement or statement of purpose, like what do you want to do with it. They may require your resume or CV. If you're in that creative outlet, they may require a portfolio submission. A lot of them require interviews. So there's a lot of parts to the grad school application. And one of my big things is understanding that there are important ones. Like Jason said, your exam grades are going to be important. Your GPA is going to be important. Those kind of things are going to be important. But there's also other things that you can use to compensate if you have any deficiencies in those areas. So for instance, if you don't have what you would feel is a high enough, or what you would think is a high enough GPA. Now we're talking, you still have to have a decent GPA. You can't be part of the blood alcohol content club where your GPA is lower than your blood alcohol content. You can't, don't laugh. I know people that was in that club. So you can't be that low, but if you're in that range or the lower end of what they say on their website as their recommended range, you can compensate for this kind of stuff if you excel in other areas. And I've said this before, my GPA wasn't the greatest. I mean, it wasn't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it wasn't up to Jason's par for sure. But I really, really relied on my personal statement, my interview ability, those kind of things, and my letter of recommendations too. But my interview specifically, that was always my bread and butter. I always felt like if I can get my foot in the door just enough to get the interview, I felt really confident in myself because I was really comfortable in those settings. So where you feel like you struggle in one, you could compensate for it in the other. You just have to put the time into it. So if you feel like your GPA is not high enough, then you really need to put the time into your personal statement, that essay or the interview. And also too, you can use those personal essays as ways to combat any concerns that they may have about a lower GPA. So for example, my GPA overall was not as high as I really wanted it to be. But if you took out the 2 years of pre-med and only looked at my business GPA as if I would have graduated with started from the beginning in business and graduated with a business degree, it was much higher. It was like 50 or 0.5 higher than what it was with my chemistry degree, or the 2 years in chemistry. So being able to put that into my essay to say, hey, yes, I understand I have this GPA, but if you only look at the business school GPA, which is what I'm trying to go into as a master's program, is business. So pretty much you're saying, if you only look at the important ones, it's this, then you're already giving them an answer to a concern that they may have. And that's a big piece. So that's why I was saying, if you feel like you have a deficiency in one area, make sure to try to compensate it and spend time in the other areas where you can feel like you can still get that edge. That's
great advice, AJ. Couldn't agree more.
Well, that's been a great show. I love talking about grad school. Jason, we are headed out. Do you have any parting words before we leave?
Just want to remind everybody, visit the website, contact us, reach out, tell us the things you want to hear about. Because once again, we're here for you. We want to talk about the things of interest to you. So we look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, man. Well, until next time, we hope to see you there. Goodbye.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Reschool'd podcast. Be sure to head over to reschool'd.com for news and other information on things we're getting into.